Welcome and thank you everyone for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us for our first CABAA meeting of 2021. Thank you again, and a warm thank you to Steve Hadley, who is our NBAA regional representative who helped coordinate this meeting. And of course, he is the chair of the NBAA local and regional committee. A thank you, of course, to Ed Bolen, President and CEO of NBAA, who, again, for taking his time out of a very, very busy schedule to join us at CABAA. Of course, we couldn't do this without our sponsors, DuPage Flight Center, so a thank you to Mark Doles, Samuel Urer, Jacqueline Despoto, and of course, NBAA, thank you, Steve Hadley. I'd like to begin by congratulating our new board members, Bernie Burns with Executive Jet Management and Chris Kazicki with B. Coleman. Re-elected this year, we have Mark Jackson with Boeing, Pam Cavanaugh with Signature Flight Support, Mark Quandle with Solaris Aviation, and George Yunt with CABAA. A tremendous appreciation and thank you to our entire board and committee chairs and members, of all of whom can be found on the website. And of course, always a special thank you to our CABAA employees, Sandy Frentz and Wendy Quandle. We'd like to quickly review the events of 2020, a year of change, disappointment, innovation, and creativity. We had our kickoff in January, the annual meeting, followed by a local airport meeting in March. A very close call, but cancelled just days ahead of an event at Evanston High School. But we've also had several events that we did manage to pull off with the help of, again, creativity and tremendous support of our members. We've had CEF accomplishments powered in part by CABAA. Mark Jackson will expand upon these. For example, the STEM signing event, the scholarship and training awards, just to name a few. We've had disappointment this year, the golf event cancellation. However, this was then substituted by a silent auction, which was very successful. Mark will relate those details. Pam Cavanaugh and I accepted an invitation from NBAA's Local and Regional Access Committee to participate at VBase in a presentation on fundraising and philanthropy. Disappointment at holiday party cancellation. Again, we were substituted with the help of our committee by virtual fundraising through GiveSmart, donating proceeds to worthwhile organizations in the vicinity of our local airports. For 2021, we have 7 or 8 events in the works. We've reached out to all of our committee chairs for their input, and we're already in discussion with our safety committee, who are planning several virtual programs starting in Q1. We have some really interesting events being planned to include a panel discussion on aircraft deliveries and pricing trends in 21 and the forecast for 2020 and the forecast for 21. We are planning informative and meaningful meetings, whether virtual or in person. We anticipate a welcome back to reality hangar celebration, which we hope to really once again enjoy networking face-to-face in person. We anticipate a silent auction, and we're still very hopeful for the golf outing and holiday party. For those of you who may not be aware, we did have some major accomplishments and ongoing initiatives. We've strengthened committees with support and alignment of board members. We are now working on succession planning and redundancy in knowledge and competencies. We've made great advances in the technological areas, the website capabilities, and these are thanks to Mark Quandle, Gabby, and now Rob Fisher. The vice president role in 2020 was very different from years past, with Eric Warning as a core member of the board and executive committee, is also a member of the Safety Committee and chair of the newly revitalized Communications Committee, which Eric again later will expand on. The Executive Committee has really been a robust support and added value to CABAA this past year. We've had meetings where we have enjoyed some very creative suggestions and ideas given the challenges we faced in 2021. We've included on the Executive Committee for the present and now the future, the president of the CEF, in order that we as an organization may be more aligned with the CABAA Educational Foundation. I would like to now introduce Mark Jackson, who is a member of the CABAA board, the Executive Committee, as well as the CABAA Education Fund president. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nora. And I'll tell you, I think a good kickoff there, Nora, and as you noted, a time of change. And I'll tell you, Nora, in her transition as our president at CABAA, has taken advantage of, I'll say, the quiet time to get us organized and aligned, both at the CABAA side as well as the Education Foundation side, in the form of getting organized, building on the functional health within the business and running CABAA like a business, bringing that role clarity. And overall, for the increased impact and effectiveness in supporting our membership and giving back to our community. I'm super, super excited about what 21 is going to bring with this effort. Bringing that over to the Education Foundation, and it's a board supporting the funding for our community giveaways, building on that foundational health as well, along with the alignment with the CABAA board, getting the calendar operating rhythm in sync, building that pipeline, the same on CABAA on the Education Foundation side for both the board and committee side, and then running those core functions, the administrative, the comms, the finance and compliance side has been a focus in 2020, and that's been, I think, well received amongst the board, and certainly we're starting to see the fruits of that labor. From a committee side, Nora touched on that there was an effort that we took on in 19 where we put up a temporary committee, steering committee, to reassess the effectiveness of our committees and where we could have a little bit more impact, if at all, with the changing environment and the growth in our business and the pipeline development needs. That steering committee, the board took to vote with the recommendations, and I'll tell you, I'm proud to say that Alex Kwiatkowski is leading now what is our scholarship and mentoring committee with a pure focus on mentoring, funding, and the development, and Bernie standing by his side, running that committee as well. And then the other thing that came out of the steering committee was the development of the outreach and promotion committee, and this one led by Greg Adams and sponsored and supported by Jennifer Guthrie. Focused on that outreach, promotion, and ultimately placement. It really brings good alignment on that CABAA board and the effectiveness of delivering that end goal, and that's placing people in our business. On the education side, we went and looked at our committee framework as well, and we've shifted in 2020, started a fundraising committee that will be working in tandem with our CABAA side of the house to get more emphasis and maybe effectiveness there, and I'll share more about that in a minute. Also, the recipient side, and a committee solely focused on our scholarship winners, and I'll share a bit more than that in just a second. But as Nora touched on, the golf outing, we didn't have that. That's a pretty significant funding source. There are other funding sources for Education Foundation, but at first blush, the golf outing is about our membership and sponsors. So our membership showing up to that and supporting it, and our sponsors there supporting that event. But also our committee events feed into the Education Foundation. So too do two key partners. Flight Safety has been a long-standing partner in our giving, as well as now CAE, Simuflight. We also have private donors that come to the table. I'm super proud of those initiatives. And we've also had corporate donors, and Granger's the latest example of that, and proud of those past donations. I will say, thanks to Pam Cavanaugh, we had with the golf outing, I tell you, she was persistent and really came up with a brilliant idea to bring that silent auction to fruition. And with the support of Scott Moran and Sandy and Wendy Quandell, I'll just tell you, that was a true hit. And when we look at the funding that the golf outing typically brings in, I'll share with you that the silent auction brought in just over 50% of what we typically see. And that's a really good story told, and I'll add on to that in just a minute. Our distribution with the funding that we receive over the years is typically associated with scholarships in the form of 8,000 apiece, and they're in the form of general scholarships, a maintenance scholarship, Ken Johnson scholarship, and then some flight and maintenance awards specific to type ratings and specific training. We've also supported the Women's Air Classic race with Lewis Air Race. Michelle Ashworth was the last recipient there. Young Aviators, the former Young Aviators Kishwaukee Consortium, the Southern Illinois University Dogs maintenance team, who competed on an international level with their team, and Tuskegee Next are some examples of some of our past donations. In 2020, we gave away over $20,000 in scholarships and training benefits. That's a super big win. So on par with our historical side of giving. That came in the form of the scholarships, both the general, the maintenance, and the Ken Johnson. 8,000 apiece. Also 2 flight ratings, both in citations from our partners there, and also a maintenance training award. Bessie Coleman was also a recipient of our funding this year. And in partnership with the Boeing Company, we did a STEM signing day working with high schools here locally in the Northwest Indiana side for those committed to a STEM education, a scholarship there. Super excited about the impact that that's going to have. As we look at 21, I'll tell you it's going to be a full court press. Irrespective of what 20 brought us, we're going to fully fund 21. And that means certainly similar donations that we saw in 20 will happen in 21. We've got the reserves for it. And of course, the funding, as I highlighted with the silent auction, is going to fully support that as well. And we're going to focus not only on what we traditionally have given, but also we're going to start looking at that pipeline in the form of generational opportunities, and then various experience lenses, so that we take the full bandwidth of the talent that's available in our business, and then leverage our newest committee that we can work on placement into our business. I'm really excited about where that's going to go, and where our 2 committees take us on that side. In 21, the CEF is also continuing, certainly in support of the foundational health, but I'll just say excellence, execution, if you will, and thinking a little bigger. So when I mentioned the stipend guidance, taking a little bit more closer hand-holding with our recipient winners, making sure that they're set up for success both when they're on site, but also I'll say after they receive their training. So we're going to step up the game a little bit there with the recipient committee, and then also that mentoring experience in totality in partnership with our CABAA committee. We don't have a named board member for this yet. That's yet to be determined. On the fundraising side, I'll say we're going to do a full court press there and really open up our bandwidth. Jim Donath is going to lead that on behalf of the Education Foundation. He's a former CABAA president himself, former Education Foundation president himself, and I'll tell you a real neat story there. And I'll just say as well, on the other side of think big, I don't think we're that far away. In fact, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that we could have an electric plane flying in the Chicago area with the NBAA CABAA logo underneath its wings, flying around the Chicago area. So when we talk about thinking big, we really want to open up that door. We want to be a part of the future, and we want to make sure that we're leading the way on that side. And I'm super excited about where we can go. Yes, that's not a 21 initiative, but I'm going to tell you, we're going to be thinking big as we move forward. I also have some other ideas there from the team that I'll be sharing over the course of time. But hey, with no further ado, I want to introduce our keynote speaker. You may know some of what I'm going to share, but maybe others not. He's a pilot. He's a competitive tennis player. He was the former captain of Kansas University's tennis team. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in Economics. He also has a Master's of Law degree from Georgetown University. On his public side, he was a majority general counsel for Senate Committee on Health and Education, Labor Pensions. He was also the legislative director for U.S. Senator Nancy Kassenbaum. And I'll tell you, Ed himself was a key player in the passage of the General Aviation Revitalization Act of '94. I think also an honor when I look back at Ed's, he was nominated by President Clinton, and then later Senate confirmed to lead the Management Advisory Council to the FAA, and he did that 2000 through 2004. President Bush appointed him a member of the Commission on the Future of the U.S. Aerospace Industry. And I got to tell you, this in itself speaks a lot to Ed himself. And that was created by Congress to study and recommend ways to ensure American leadership in aerospace for the 21st century. Impressive in itself. On the public side, 95, Senior Vice President, General Counsel to GAMA. And then in 96, the board named him President and CEO. And as you and I and the rest of the team know, Ed, Mr. Bolen here, 2004, President, CEO of the NBAA. And I'll tell you, Ed, every time I think I'm staying busy and making a difference, I go back and look at you and I go, wow, I've got work to do. No further ado, over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Mark. You know, I think I've been coming to Chicago for the better part of 2 decades now. And every January, it's the first meeting I do every year with the regional groups. It's always cold in Chicago, but my reception from CABAA is always extremely warm. And I think that certainly continues today with that very warm and nice introduction. I'd like to begin, Mark and Nora, by congratulating you and the entire team that's been elected for leadership in 2021. Clearly, from the words you've articulated, everyone involved with CABAA recognizes how serious and important the work is, and you've underscored your commitment to getting great things done for the association and for our industry. And so knowing the kind of people that are committed to CABAA, the leadership that has been there, and the leadership going forward, it's just a real honor. And it means a lot to me every year to be invited to share my views on the year ahead, talk a little bit about our industry, and importantly, take questions from everybody. And so I think with that, I think I'll kind of go back to where we were last year when we met in January, and I got to talk a little bit about the things that I thought would be the defining issues of 2020, the big issues that I felt like really would be defining. And I know one of them we talked about at some length, and I'm certainly going to talk about all of these as we go forward. But boy, one issue that was just overwhelming when we met last year was the issue of sustainability. Many of you will recall that at the time I was there, Time Magazine had just named a teenager from Sweden as their Person of the Year. She took a boat to the North America to talk about sustainability. The term flight shaming had entered the common vocabulary, and it was pretty clear to all of us that sustainability was going to be a major issue in 2020, and well beyond. I think another issue that we were very focused on as we gathered last year was workforce. Clearly at the time, the airlines were hiring and hiring in big numbers. The projections were all for growth. The impacts were being felt throughout the aviation community. And a great focus went on how we could attract and retain pilots, maintenance technicians, and other professionals into the aviation industry writ large, but more specifically into business aviation itself. And there was a lot of conversation about how important it was for us to look in places we'd never looked before and find avenues we had not found before. We recognized that we needed to increase the diversity and the inclusion of our industry. And so workforce was a very big part as we entered 2020. And then the third thing that we talked about at some length last year was the remarkable evolution in aviation technologies. We talked about how drones had gone from becoming something for the military to something that we had over 1 million operators in the United States registered with the FAA. We talked about electrical vehicles, hybrid vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, the fact that urban air mobility, which we now call advanced air mobility, was dominating a lot of our conversations. And we had over 200 companies looking to develop what we then called urban air mobility. So certainly going into 2020, sustainability, workforce, and technology promised to be the overwhelming issues of our time. And then, of course, COVID came. And as Nora pointed out, it became a year of change. It became a year of uncertainty, and in some ways it became a year of chaos. For our industry, the change that was affecting the entire world was clearly felt by all of us. That uncertainty, that change, that chaos became part of our everyday life. It affected us on a personal level, on a company level, on a community and country level. It has affected everyone in the world. But I think when we look at what the overarching defining things for our industry were, they're not too far from some of the things that Nora talked about. Nora talked about change. I like to refer to it as resilience. We found ways. We found ways to get things done. We found ways to support each other. Just as Mark mentioned how, yes, CABAA lost its golf tournament, but it found a way forward with the silent virtual auction. I think our industry did that writ large in a lot of ways. Yes, we found our industry affected by COVID in a very significant way, but in a lot of ways, we found ways to move forward in spite of the challenge. We didn't give up. We didn't surrender. We didn't play the victim. We demonstrated constant resilience. We worked hard to find how to do things like disinfect airplanes, put together maintenance crews, operate in a bubble. We found ways to enable flights to continue, albeit at a very slow pace. We also found a way to find our way through with innovation, with shared experiences. And so whether it was us learning to operate in an ATC 0 environment, helping us find ways to keep our pilots safe on the road, get maintenance technicians in, be able to work with Capitol Hill and the regulatory branch to do things like pass major provisions of the CARES Act related to our industry, or change regulations that dealt with medical proficiency training and all the other deadlines. All of that was a demonstration of our resilience and our innovation. And at the end of the day, I think 2020 was in a lot of ways a year of progress. It was a year of progress because in so many areas, we didn't give up. We found ways to go forward. Going back to what I talked about as one of the major issues of the year expected to be sustainability, it would have been easy for us to say, well, we have an even more urgent crisis now. We can't focus on sustainability. But instead of doing that, you saw our industry moving out on sustainable aviation fuel, holding major summits, being able to raise the awareness about this remarkable fuel that has the ability to reduce our carbon footprint substantially. How do we raise awareness? Well, we did a lot of promotion that began over a year ago, but did not stop as we went forward into 2020. It went forward, and now you've been able to see a number of announcements that have been made over the last couple of weeks and months about the availability, the growing availability of sustainable aviation fuel in California, in the state of Washington, companies that are signing agreements. Sustainable aviation fuel is an area where we didn't sit still. We actually made enormous progress. I think that's also true about some of the emerging technologies. You know, I think there was an expectation that perhaps the advanced air mobility, supersonic, all of that would kind of go on the shelf as a result of the COVID crisis. Instead, what we've seen is major announcements about funding of some of the new companies that was able to take place. And even with supersonic transport, just within the last couple of weeks, we saw the state of Kansas announce supersonic corridors that will allow testing. And I think that's an exciting development because what we're looking at is being able to see a continued additional advancement in all areas of aviation, from drones through supersonic. And I think we've now become very comfortable with commercial space launch. So that idea that we were on the cusp of technology breakthroughs has not gone away. It's only gotten stronger as the year has gone on. And it's the reason someone like Mark Jackson can talk to us today and talk enthusiastically and clearly about the day in the not too distant future when an electric airplane can fly around Chicago with CABAA's logo on it. So I think, to a lot of people's surprise, 2020 was a year of progress. It was a year of resiliency. It was a year of innovation. And while nobody wanted to go through it, and nobody would go through it again if we had a chance to avoid it, like so many things that you're forced to do, it tested us at our core. It put pressure on us. It forced us to evaluate who we are as individuals, as companies. And in a lot of ways, we are emerging stronger. We know we can communicate well together. We know how to share our experiences. We know how to work with the federal government at both the congressional and the executive branch on regulations. It has been a year when all of our channels have been tested and we have emerged. We're now in 2021. So I think now as we go forward and I think about where we were a year ago and what the themes of this year might be, clearly sustainability did not go away. And it's something that we will continue to embrace. I think the challenge now that we have raised awareness of sustainable aviation fuel, the availability is beginning to go up. We want to now find ways to continue to push and accelerate both the availability and the adoption, the use of it. And clearly there are book and claim systems that are under development, which we think has the ability to go further and faster on that. I think technology continues to be a great issue. The changes are continuing as we've discussed, but I think another thing that will be fundamental to this year will be growth. I think 2021 is going to be a year of growth. You know, 2019 started, the first 2 months looked like they were going to be very positive. And then of course the curtain came down in March. April, we were effectively staring at an abyss. I think the air traffic on April 12th, 2020 was the lowest it had been in decades. But we began to see some climbing out, not a lot of corporate movement, but some people coming into our industry for the first time as charter customers, subscription customers, fractional ownership. They began to use business aviation, in some cases to do personal trips, but to also see what the benefits really are, the flexibility, the connectivity, the ability to do more in less time and to do it in a safe and secure environment. So I think as we come into this year, clearly one of the things that we need is we need the vaccine. We need the vaccine, and the good news is it appears to work and work well, but the rollout is going slow. We need to have that accelerate. But assuming it does, I think that the opportunities for business aviation are very real, and I think it presents an opportunity that we have probably not experienced before. And that is an opportunity to help lead the recovery rather than be a trailing indicator of a recovery. Normally what you'll see happen in an economic cycle is that business aviation is kind of an early indicator of a downturn, but a trailing indicator of a recovery. This time I think that's going to be different because we've got companies opening up. There is not as much commercial service or frequency as there was before. We'll have global markets that are going to begin to open up. So I think what you will now see is reliance on business aviation will be a leading indicator of a recovery rather than a trailing indicator. And I also think that the need and desire to be face-to-face, to renew relationships with customers, to build on the foundations that were set pre-COVID is going to be very real. So I think this is a year when there's an opportunity for a significant amount of growth. I think we can play a leadership role on that. I think we have an opportunity to turn people who have come to our industry looking for safety and personal transportation into full-time customers, recognizing that business aviation allows you to do more in less time, to visit 3 cities in 1 day instead of 1 city in 3 days. The ability to move equipment, turn travel time into productive work time, to reach places that may not otherwise be reached. And I think, given all of that, we entered 2021 probably a little scarred by our experiences from the last year, a little taken aback by the way the year has begun to open, but with a lot of hope about what 2021 can ultimately be. So I'm excited to be back here speaking to CABAA today. I think once again, we're looking at a new year with excitement and hope. We're clear-eyed about the challenges that are ahead of us. But I think one thing we've learned over the course of the last year is that we're all in this together, that we can share each other's strengths, we can share each other's experiences, and then together we can shape our destiny. We don't have to play the victim. We can be leaders. And I think that's what CABAA has consistently done through the years. It's why it's always been a special opportunity to speak with you. And so with that, I'm going to stop my prepared remarks for the day and maybe take some questions from Mark and Nora and the rest of the team in Chicago.
Yeah, Ed, I appreciate that. We're going to do a handoff here, and I got to thank you for your words and taking the time to come with us virtually. And I certainly look forward to you coming back here live as well. Bernie Burns is going to lead us through the Q&A section. I know our members have quite a few questions for you, and you sparked some great conversation already. So with that, Bernie is a board member here on the CABAA side, newly appointed, and super excited about that. And of course, as I shared earlier, he's also on our committee supporting our mentorship. So with that, Bernie.
Thank you, Mark, so much. Good afternoon, Ed. Thank you so much for that insight and for just some of your comments. I know my colleagues and I are all very much looking forward to 2021. So thanks for your wisdom in the future as well. Just a quick introduction. My name is Bernie Burns. I'll be leading the Q&A portion of today's events. If you don't know who I am, I've been a member for 10 years, as Mark just alluded to, in the newest class of CABAA board members. And I just started a job at Executive Jet Management as their sales director this week. So it's been a wild year so far. And the thing I'm most proud of, and I think that you'll appreciate this as well, Mr. Bolen, the thing I'm most proud of is the idea that I was a kid who thought there was no place for him in aviation and business aviation. It's through support and relationships at CABAA that have gotten me to where I am, and it'll take me to the pinnacle. So I thank you all, and I'd love to get started on some questions for you. If you have any questions, please, just as a reminder, you can send them in the chat and they will get to me. But let me start off with some that we've already had prepared, sent in from our colleague Alan Farkas. This is going to be in regards to COVID, but in regards to the recent CDC order requiring a negative COVID test prior to international US bound travel, he's been in touch with the AOPA's general counsel and believes that GA is included in this as well. The rule starts January 26th. Members will probably have to keep records as well. Where does NBAA stand on that regulation?
Well, first of all, before I answer Alan's question, let me say, Bernie, how pleased I am to see you and have an opportunity to answer questions from you. And I appreciate the time you took to share the importance of CABAA to your ability to be part of our community. I think, I mentioned I've been coming to CABAA meetings for a very long time. And every year I see the focus that CABAA puts on scholarships, internships, mentorships, and it has been remarkable through the years to see people who at one point in their career were scholarship winners and at other points were on the scholarship committee because they were part of the industry. So I think you're a great example of what CABAA means to people who want to be in business aviation, and underscores the importance for all of us to try to help others and bring people into our remarkable industry and provide the amazing benefits that come from being in an industry that creates so much community and cares about each other. With regard to Alan's questions, yes, the CDC has come out with that requirement that will begin on January 26th. There is no question but that it does apply to business aviation, general aviation, as well as commercial aviation. There are some exceptions to it, and part of those exceptions will be for crew members who are in transportation to continue with their work. We think that there are some exceptions. They're going to be available for people coming into the country for flight training. But as a general rule, the requirement for a COVID test is going to be universal. It's a 3-day test, and the expectation is that you will need to be able to demonstrate and certify that you have had a negative test within the last 72 hours. So it is something that will apply to us, but there will be some limited exceptions for crew members.
Yeah. Any efforts you think to standardize that across the globe, or do you think it's still going to continue to be, by region where they regulate in different ways?
Yeah, I think like so much, people will be taking the cues by what they see from some of the larger, most developed countries. And so I think a lot of this has to do with what's the situation in the United Kingdom, what's the situation in Europe, what's the situation in the United States. And I think that will have a large impact on how things are viewed nationwide or across the world. But I think our experience on this and trying to get good information and clear information about what is out there, and that's clearly a responsibility of NBAAs, getting information about what the rules are, what they mean, and how you can comply with it is a big part of helping people understand how we operate in this environment. And it's been a key part of everything we've tried to do with COVID: understand the situation, explain the situation, share experiences, and be able to provide some predictability. So the regulation is what it is, and we're going to work hard to make sure people understand it and that it's easy to comply with.
Yeah, great. Switching gears completely, talking about taxes a little bit. With the new administration coming into the White House, do you foresee any massive changes for tax benefits or bonus depreciation?
Well, I think during the campaign, there was a lot of talks about tax policy. I think the reality of the election is that there are, as all of us know, now very narrow majorities. I think in the House of Representatives, depending on how you count it, with people going into the administration, there's, let's call it a 5-person difference between Democrats and the Republicans. In the Senate, it could not be closer. It's 50-50 with the tying vote going to the vice president. So it's the narrowest of margins, which suggests to most political commentators that the ability to do huge, overwhelming change is probably limited. There will be more of an effort to try to find a constructive middle, which suggests that changes in policies, including tax policy, are probably going to be more limited in nature. Obviously, we'll see how that all plays out. But at this point, I think most people, including the markets, seem to believe that overwhelming tax changes are probably not probable. I will say, just as long as we're on the political field, I think what probably is very much in play, however, is the idea that there will be a major infrastructure bill. When you look at the last couple of years, we've talked about infrastructure, but there's never been really a connection made that has brought Republicans and Democrats together. I think the idea of infrastructure is not necessarily partisan. I think what you're going to see, though, over the course of the next year is that what we've traditionally thought of as an infrastructure package is going to be Build a Lot as a jobs and recovery package. There will be a sense we want to put people back to work, rebuilding roads or building airports or vertiports or other things. And so I think there is probably much more of an impetus to get something done. I think there will be less of a concern about how that is all paid for. But I think what you'll see is an infrastructural bill will serve as a jobs bill, a recovery bill. I think it will have some environmental ramifications to it, but I think that's probably the most likely big legislation to get through after we get through some of the other issues, including confirmation of appointees and so forth.
Yeah, understood. Thank you so much for that. Switching gears again, back to UAVs. You mentioned it earlier, and I know you've spoken about this, and the industry has taken light to this as well. But with the rise of the UAV interest and activity, can you discuss efforts NBAA is taking to ensure a mutually beneficial use of airspace and infrastructure, and the appropriate development of regulations to ensure safe operations across the board?
Yeah, I think what we've seen from what's now being called the advanced air mobility, emerging advanced air mobility segment, is that for a number of years they have been working through certification. To date, none of the aircraft have been certified, but many of them are well on the path, and certification seems to be in sight. Once the aircraft is certified, then we move into the operational environment. And as you know, there are lots of different capabilities and business cases, some of them involving airports, some involving heliports or vertiports, some of them taking off from buildings. So I think what we're seeing is that the aircraft certification is beginning to give way to the operational questions and the operational environment, where NBAA has always played a significant role, providing access to both airports and airspace. And I think we will certainly play a big role going forward in the advanced air mobility world. And I think there are enormous opportunities as we see these technological breakthroughs. I think, what we're seeing is the technology culture has got a lot to offer, but it is fundamentally different from the aviation culture. Just an example, a lot of the tech culture is fail often, fail fast, learn from failure. The aviation community, failure has often meant a fatality, and we've been very careful on that. But there is a lot, if we can take the best from both industries, the inspiration and breakthroughs associated with technology, with the safety culture and processes of aviation, and combined it for the best of both. I think the opportunities for our industry are really exciting, and it will make mobility something, whether you're traveling across town or around the world, something that is much more available for all of us. So I think there's enormous opportunity with advanced air mobility. I think it will be important that we find ways to integrate and do it safely and fairly across the board. And I think NBAA and the business aviation can play a huge role in that.
Perfect. Just two more quick questions. The impact of COVID-19, the human capital decisions, that survey last year really provided a lot of help for a lot of our members. Are there any plans to follow up with that survey in 2021, addressing the impact of COVID on our industry for next year?
Yeah, our community works hard, and we work hard to try to understand what are people going through, where are we, where do we want to go, how can we help each other do that. And so, when we look through kind of the challenges that faced our industry, whether it was layoffs and how do we pull money into our industry through the CARES Act, the PSP, the PPP programs, the airport grants, whether it's how we bring in people to our industry to attract and retain them, make sure we're understood to be a diverse and inclusive industry. All of those issues, I think, are fundamental to our ability to go forward. You know, we're an industry that, sure, it's driven by infrastructure, it's driven by technology, but what we've really learned is it's driven by people. When we talk about the resilience of our industry, we're talking about the individuals who make the system work, fall back on procedures and infrastructure that is in place, but ultimately we are an industry of people. And so finding ways to make sure that we understand what the challenges and opportunities are, and finding ways to not just be in touch with that, but share our strength, use our elective government, our executive branch, our institutions at the local and regional level. That's a big part of our ability to survive this particular challenge and then position ourselves to thrive going forward.
Perfect. And last question for you. I know this is a pet project of my own. I've seen across the board, we've seen a lot of new entrants into our space, and I want to make sure that that we have a plan for them to retain them in our future. My question to you is, does NBAA have a plan, or will create a plan to be proactively communicating with these new entrants, whether they be, you know, flight departments or individual flyers, just to make sure that they're aligned with the future of where our industry is going?
Yeah, we obviously, NBAA believes, and I think everyone in our community believes, that business aviation has a broad definition. You know, when we talk traditionally about the use of any general aviation aircraft for a business purpose, we see that very broadly. What's a general aviation aircraft? And we're talking about some of the technologies that make that up. What are the different utilization strategies? Clearly, you know, 20 years ago, we were just beginning to get our arms around fractional ownership. Since then, we've seen jet cards, we've seen the growth of management companies, we've seen the advent of subscription services. So, and over the course of the last year, we've seen a lot of people coming into our industry through all of those, charter, everything. And so, as we have new technologies coming in, as we have new utilization options available, how do we make sure everybody coming in sees and understands that they're part of this big, growing, evolving business aviation community? And I think part of it is outreach, letting people know you're welcome to the industry, whether you are someone who has chartered an aircraft for the first time in 2020, or whether you're a company that has been operating business aircraft for decades. It's all business aviation, and that we're committed to making sure that the broad definition of business aviation is understood, that owner operators of single engine piston airplanes up to companies that own intercontinental business jets, this is all who we are, and our ability to grow together is based in part on how well we work together, how we share information, and how well we understand each other. And so I think one of the things that, you know, as we look to move forward, we need to each understand how important that broad definition is. I time and time again, I've met people in our industry that says, well, we're turbine and they're piston, or we're, you know, flight department, their owner operator. We're Part 91, they're Part 135. And lots of people find lots of different ways to kind of slice and dice our community. But at the end of the day, for most of the world, we're small aircraft. We're not military, we're not commercial, we're the everything else. And so the success or failure of any part of our industry has an impact on all of us. And so our ability to reach out and work together to make sure we're safe, to make sure we're secure, to make sure we're professional. All of us are tied to that. And NBAA hopes to play a leadership role and put out the welcome mat and put out the best practices through our association with organizations like CABAA that do such a great job of promoting best practices, best standards, and understanding the vital role that safety and security play in all of our futures.
Perfect. Great way to end that segment. You were so gracious with your time, and we will never be taking that for granted. So thank you so much. I'm sure I speak for all of my colleagues and say that we hope to see you at base this year. And again, I just want to thank you for your time and for your insight and for your wisdom.
Thank you, Bernie. Thanks for everyone at CABAA for all you do. It's, as I said before, it's an honor every year to be with you in January. So I'm looking forward to 2022 already. In the meantime, I do hope I'll see everybody in Las Vegas for NBAA base in October. Take care, everyone.
And I'll be passing the mic over now to Eric Warning, who's going to give us some CABAA topics and then closing remarks. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks so much, Bernie. Appreciate it. And thanks to you, Ed. Thanks to everybody today, Bernie, Nora, Mark. I know we all have very busy schedules, and I really cannot say thank you enough to all the CABAA committees, Sandy, Wendy. I want to key off what you said earlier, Ed. You talked about how this business is people-driven, and same goes for CABAA. We wouldn't, I mean, the people that volunteer their time and put their heart and soul in this organization is what makes it what it is today. So I couldn't agree with you more. So I just wanted to reiterate that gratitude for everybody. I'm going to take just 1 minute to sort of a shout out to my committee, the communications committee. I really appreciate the work of one of our brand new this year CABAA scholarship winners, Delaney Johnson, who has dove in head first and dealt with all of my inadequacies as a chairman of the committee and carried a tremendous load. So I cannot thank her enough. And then our newest member, Julie Morella from Carver Aero. I'm so excited to see what things come from our experience together. And then Rob Fisher, who's also sort of ad hoc attached to our committee and did yeoman's work to make today happen. You know, many people contributed to this, Wendy and Mark Quandall and Sandy and everybody, Pam, who worked behind the scenes as it related to the website, making sure that our membership and members knew that this event was happening, and Rob for producing this whole thing and sort of managing it behind the scenes. Can't thank you enough. We really appreciate your efforts. So one more sort of plug for the organization. For all of you today that attended, we really appreciate you being here. We can't say thanks enough to everyone. And there's always opportunities to volunteer if you're so inclined. We're a growing organization, and we're always excited to meet new people and allow you opportunity to help. So thanks again, Ed. Thanks everybody for coming today. Thanks Nora for putting this together, and everybody have a great day.